Are you tired of inventory systems that kill your profits? In today's episode, we're revealing the advanced inventory management systems that separate struggling bars from profit powerhouses, the true cost calculation that most bar owners get completely wrong, and the loss prevention framework that eliminates inventory shrinkage before it destroys your margins. Hello, and welcome to the Bar Business Podcast, where we help bar owners increase profits, attract loyal guests, and simplify operations so you can avoid burnout and finally enjoy your life outside of your bar. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, the Bar Business Coach. Today on the Bar Business Podcast, we're exploring advanced inventory management. Now, when we talk inventory management, we've talked inventory management a lot, and today we're going to dive into some of the more advanced ways to look at your inventory management. So, if you're still struggling to get inventory under control, listen, there might be some great ideas for you. Frankly, what we're going to talk through today, I don't think any one person can do all of these things. There's just too much here. But inventory management isn't necessarily complicated. You need the right methods, the right systems in place in order to make your inventory management very successful. Now, something I will just say from the top, if you have a bar that's doing extensive volume, you might want to look at outsourcing your inventory management. So, not a sponsor of mine, but I'm friends with a lot of guys that work with Bar Metrics, and Bar Metrics is always an option to outsource. That inventory portion, they're going to come in, they're going to count, they're going to give you all their reports, they're going to take care of all of that for you. Now, like I said, at high volume, that's a great thing to do because they're going to do a very advanced inventory management for you. But the problem is that's going to cost you $600, $700, $800 a month. And for a lot of smaller owners, that's not an achievable thing. It's not worth that money. They're not going to save enough to get there. Now, where's that break point? Well, it depends on how bad your inventory is and all that. But if you're big enough and you really want to get into doing really good inventory, maybe it's a good idea to hire someone else to do it. But if you're looking to tweak your inventory within your own bar and get systems in place that are going to help you succeed, that's what today's episode is all about. So I think, just to restate kind of where we are, I think you all know, if you're listening to this, you know that you have frustration around your inventory problems. Frequently, as a bar owner, you're going to think that you have enough wine for the weekend, but somehow run out on Friday night, or your beer costs creep up month after month and you can't figure out why. Or you're ordering the same amount and the same things that you always have at the same par levels, but your margins keep shrinking. So we're going to talk about how you can identify these issues and, again, just some really advanced inventory management systems. First thing I want to talk about today is inventory cost analysis. So a lot of times we think, okay, I buy this inventory, it costs me what a bottle costs, right? If a bottle of Bacardi costs $29 or whatever it is today, a bottle of Bacardi costs me $29. Well, that's partially true. And honestly, when we're talking liquor, it's a little bit easier than when we're talking food. And we've talked about this fact before. Food is perishable, liquor is not. Our perishable inventory, we have to monitor better than our non-perishable inventory in a lot of ways, because our non-perishable inventory, you overbought Pimm's. And so you have 6 bottles of Pimm's sitting in your back room. It's bad to have 6 bottles of Pimm's worth of cash just sitting on a shelf if you don't serve a lot of Pimm's. But you can come up with some cocktail specials and get rid of it. And if you don't, it's going to last forever, right? That Pimm's will be just as good next year as it is this year. That is not true of a tomato, right? A tomato, you got a week, maybe 2. And then that tomato is completely trash. So we have to think about what inventory we're talking about, as well as then how do we manage it. Now, when we're talking about inventory cost analysis, we want to get into the carrying costs, as well as the cost of the inventory itself, to really understand what the full cost of our inventory is. And that's going to include things like your storage space. We don't think about this a lot, but if you have a bar that, just for easy math, is 10,000 square feet, and you have 1,000 feet of storage space, and your rent's $10,000 a month, you're spending $1,000 a month to store stuff. Like, that is part of the cost of having your inventory. It's also one of the good reasons to run as small of an inventory as possible, because then you're using the least amount of money to rent the space to put the stuff in. Not just the money on the shelf itself, but the rent money that you're using to keep that on the shelf. The other thing that we need to consider when we're talking true cost is spoilage risk and opportunity cost, right? Because if money's tied up in inventory, it's not in something else. So there are all these hidden cost components. You could also factor in, when you're looking at the actual cost of inventory, what's the labor that it takes to receive, to store, to count, to do your inventory every week. And then the cost of your stockouts, emergency orders, the time and effort it takes to run to the store to buy something overpriced because you got your inventory wrong when you were doing your ordering. And we can wrap all of this kind of consideration up into a carrying cost formula. So, what is that formula? Well, it's annual carrying costs, is what we're going to be calculating here. And so, what we want to take is three separate factors to determine this formula. First, average inventory value times the storage cost as a percentage of that value. So, if you have $10,000 and it costs you 10% to store it, you have $11,000, right? So we're going to multiply that out. Then we're going to add to that labor hours times the hourly rate. So we have a manager that takes care of our inventory who makes, I don't know, $10 an hour for easy math, and they work 10 hours on inventory a month. That's $100 of labor there. Obviously, that's a little bit higher in the real world, but I'm just trying to do easy math. And then we add to that our spoilage rate times our product value. So if we have, a half case of tomatoes spoils every week, and a case of tomatoes costs us $12, then we have $12 of spoilage. So inventory value storage costs plus labor hours times hourly rate plus spoilage rate times product value. And when we put those three factors together, that gives us all the cost of maintaining our inventory on top of what the inventory actually costs. Those inventory costs we then can measure, right? Once we have this annual carrying cost figure as a percentage of revenue. So now we know not just what our inventory costs us, but what managing our inventory costs us, the entire cost of maintaining that inventory. And when we're looking at that as a percentage of revenue, right? Run the calculation. You're going to freaking shock yourself because it's probably around 10%. Once you include all the carrying costs, all the labor, it's probably 10% of your revenue. Now, that is the calculation when I was talking at the beginning about, hey, sometimes it makes sense to outsource your inventory. That's the calculation that tells you whether or not you need to outsource inventory. But it's also the calculation that's going to say, hey, I'm at 10% of my total revenue. I'm just spending on managing my inventory. I need to drive this cost down. And the big thing to always keep in mind when we're talking about cost and inventory is opportunity cost, right? If you have 6 bottles of Pimm's on the shelf and that's worth $100, I mean, Pimm's is worth more than that, but let's just say it's $100 worth of Pimm's on the shelf. That's $100 you can't spend on something else. So never forget opportunity cost. Now, once you know what your inventory costs, what are some advanced things that we can do with inventory in general? Well, let's talk about advanced tracking systems. So this is where we have a lot of options. One of them being hire somebody to do it. The other thing that you can always do is look at digital inventory integrations. So whether that's Margin Edge, Market Man, Extra Chef, which is Toast now, those allow you to input your order information, do your inventory through them, reconcile that so that you always have your actual and theoretical costs figured out, what you need to do, whether you're paying a software to do it or you're doing it by hand. That's something that you should do, is always compare actual and theoretical costs. And yes, these systems tend to be a bit expensive, but the value you get from them, especially if you're higher volume, can well exceed the cost. The other thing that you need to look at when it comes to advanced systems, so you essentially have three options: hire some software, hire a company that does it all for you, including accounting, or make a spreadsheet, right? There is enough, and I don't have a spreadsheet for you. If you twist my arm, get a strategy session, twist my arm, I might be able to help you make one. But I don't have that just sitting around right now. But you can make an Excel sheet that will cover everything you need to know about your inventory. Now, it's more difficult. It's going to take time, but there is a way to do this without spending any money at all on just building in-house systems. A couple things to keep in mind. You need, regardless of how you're doing this, recipe level tracking. So you need to break down all your complex cocktails and food items into ingredient levels, right? How much of each ingredient are you using? Without that, we can never understand the difference between actual inventory use and theoretical inventory use, right? Actual being, well, I used 3 bottles of Bacardi last week. Theoretical being based upon the number of rum and cokes I sold, and that's, let's just say my bar only sells rum and cokes. Based on the number of rum and cokes I sold, I should have only used 2 bottles of Bacardi, not 3. So that's actual would be 3 bottles. Theoretical would be 2 bottles. That's a 33% difference, or 50% more usage than it should be. That's a huge deal that you would need to figure out. So we always need to know actual versus theoretical. And to understand actual versus theoretical, we have to break down to the recipe level for our ingredients on every item, on every menu that we have. And I can hear some of you right now thinking, that is a huge pain in the ass. And you know what? I wish I could say something positive here, but you're 100% right. It's a huge pain in the ass. But it doesn't change the fact that in order to understand your inventory, in order to optimize your business, you still need to do it, even though it's a pain in the ass. A lot of times we talk about work on your bar, not in your bar. And bar owners get the idea that working on my bar will be way more fun than working in my bar. I love data. I love numbers. And I'll tell you, I'd rather work in front of a fryer all night long than do that spreadsheet. But you can do it and it's essential for your business, right? This is not a nice to have thing. This is an essential thing if you actually want to optimize your profits over the long run. So now we've talked how we figure out the cost of our inventory. We've talked some more advanced ways to look at inventory. But what do we do about loss prevention? Because one of the biggest pieces of inventory is loss prevention. It's one of the reasons we do it. And understanding that actual versus theoretical graph is how we develop an understanding of our shrinkage. Shrinkage being things that get used that shouldn't have, right? So going back to my example of we should have sold 2 bottles of rum last week, but we sold 3. So we were putting 50% more rum in all our rum and cokes than we should have. That is shrinkage. And shrinkage in and of itself is just how much you use in excess of what you should have used. So that doesn't necessarily indicate always that it's theft. It could be poor training. It could be overpouring, not for reasons of theft, but for reasons of not knowing how to count, right? Because if you're free pouring out of your bottles, that counts really important. If your team is not properly trained on how to count and they don't count consistently, you're probably going to have some shrinkage. So the first thing to always keep in mind is when we see shrinkage, it could be poor processes, it could be poor training, it could be theft. We want to avoid jumping straight to theft. And it could also be an administrative error. Maybe you just put down that you had one more bottle than you did last week, and that's where that waste comes from. But a lot of people jump straight to theft. It's not always theft. So whenever you see shrinkage, first thing you need to do some loss source analysis, figure out where that came from, and actually establish why. We've talked about the 5 whys before, asking why until you get to the root cause of an issue. Do that process so that you understand exactly where that shrinkage came from. Now, once we understand where it came from, what can we do to prevent shrinkage just kind of in general? Well, staff accountability systems. Establish a clear counting procedure so that everybody on your team counts the same way. Verify people's ability to count if you're free pouring. Verify people's understanding of how to use a jigger if you're using jiggers. Like constantly train. We've talked about that a lot on this podcast. But on top of training, also, you need the documentation for them to refer to, right? A lot of times shrinkage, it's not poor training. It's not anything other than bartender forgot how to make a drink and then made it wrong, poured it down the drain, right? Shouldn't happen. So train. Make sure people know what they're doing and the procedure, the processes, and the methods of how to do it. Now, outside of staff accountability, we can look at technology solutions, right? So that's getting back to those softwares. But if we have digital platforms in place, we can use those to flag unusual patterns. And we can do that on alerts, make it immediate, and that way we know what's going on before a problem gets worse. The other thing you can do is have security protocols. So something that drives me absolutely freaking insane when I talk to some bar owners is that their liquor rooms aren't locked or that every bartender has a key to the entirety of the liquor storage. I mean, if you're worried about theft, security is the way to stop theft. So all of your liquor should be stored in locked areas with access restrictions, surveillance systems in place. Like put a camera in your liquor room. Or if you're storing liquor in your office, which was what I always did, because I think, it's a great multi-use space. You can put liquor on shelves all the way up the walls and then work under the liquor, which is what I did in every bar I was in charge of. And, but that's a restricted space by definition, right? It's the office. It's where the safe is. It's where the money is. It's where the liquor is because the liquor is the money. And I had a camera in there so that if somebody tried to rob me, I knew it. So make sure you have a lock space and surveillance systems on your inventory because your inventory, when you really think about it, if you have $10,000 of inventory, it's the same as putting $10,000 on the shelf and saying, hey, come steal this. Well, you probably want a camera and a locked door there. If you're not doing that, do that. The other thing that you really need to do when it comes to loss prevention, and this is just a blanket statement, and this is true of everything you do security-wise in your bar, but in particular here, we're talking loss prevention. Don't get complacent, right? Don't set up the locked door and the security system and then let the security system stop working and forget to update it and leave the door unlocked all the time. That ain't going to do anything. Don't spend a bunch of money on software so that you can have these wonderful reports and perfectly know your inventory and everything going on every day and then not use it. Don't become complacent. Complacency is very easy, especially with something as boring as inventory, because let's be honest, it's kind of freaking boring and it's not fun to do. But when you get complacent, bad things happen. So just avoid that altogether. Now, let's talk about how do we optimize. So we got our cost, we're watching for loss, we understand the analysis, but what do we do with all this? How do we optimize? Well, a few things I'm going to throw at you. I have 5 ideas here that we can use to optimize our inventory. Number 1, do a turnover rate analysis. So calculate inventory turns by category and optimize slower moving items through menu engineering or elimination. So when we talk about inventory turnover, that's the number of days you keep inventory around, right? So if you keep 12 bottles of vodka, of well vodka is your par every week, and at the end of every week you have 0 bottles of vodka, your turnover rate is 12 bottles of vodka per week, right? Basic stuff. There's more math we can do there, and I've gotten into turnover rate in other podcasts. So you can Google it. You can listen to other podcasts that go back and look at the inventory ones I've done. You'll find it all there. But turnover rate, kind of important. We want to make sure our inventory is turning over every 14 days. A lot of bars, particularly on liquor, are looking at 28, 30 days. That's too long. Make it 14 days. You're going to get a delivery at least once a week. 14 days lets you miss it 1 week and still get a delivery the next week and not run out. So optimize to 14 days or less. The second idea on how we can optimize our inventory, set up an A, B, C classification system. And when I say A, B, C, what I'm talking about is how valuable, how much movement there is in an inventory item, and how much you have on hand, right? How much you're going through. So essentially, A, B, C, we're ranking our items based upon value and how quickly they move. So say we have a really high value item. Maybe you have a bottle of Louis the 13th behind the bar. Now, most bars won't, but maybe you have a bottle of Louis the 13th. It's high value. That's an A item. We want to watch that thing like a freaking hawk. Or, it can be something a lot cheaper than that. It can be Grand Patron. It can be a lot of your different bourbons. Grandpappy. You better have that as an A because it's a very high cost item. You also want to look at high turnover items. And on those things that you say are an A, we want to look at those at least once a day, right? That should be a daily inventory check because they're either really expensive or they move a lot. They're really important for our business that we have these on hand, that we're monitoring them, that we're taking care of them, that we're not overusing them. So A items, we're going to inventory daily. Then you're going to have B items. B is stuff that's, kind of used, not too bad. And we're going to want to make sure we're checking those every week. And then we have C items. C items are things that don't get used much. Say Galliano. I think most bars still have a bottle of Galliano behind it. And I know I owned a bar for 8 years. I bought Galliano twice. And I bought 375s and they sat there. A bottle of Galliano lasted me 3 years. And if that's the case, I don't need to check my Galliano every day, right? It moved 5 ounces a month. Well, less than that. It moved like 2 ounces a month. So it doesn't really matter. So you can check that monthly. So rate all your inventory A, B, C. A items you double check daily. B items you double check weekly. C items you double check monthly. And that's going to prioritize you, but it's also going to put you in a position where your highest value, highest volume items, the ones where you have loss, it's really going to hurt you. Where if you run out and 86 them, it's going to hurt you. Check those every day. Next idea I have for you is vendor performance optimization. Now, what does vendor performance optimization mean? Well, it means push back on your suppliers, on your liquor reps, on your beer reps, on your food sales guy. Not in a bad way, right? I'm never for let's dog people to try to get money out of them. That's just being a jackass, and we don't want to do that. But track the delivery accuracy. Look at the product quality. Look at your payment terms. If you can negotiate payment terms where you can pay later. So if and we've talked about this in the last week, we talked about this. But if you have cash flow and I know my inventory turnover is 14 days and I can pay for that inventory in 21 days, I'm never paying for things I have. I'm paying for things I already sold. That's fantastic. So you can look at payment terms. Now with order delivery and product quality, we don't necessarily have a huge amount of flexibility there, but send things back. Complain to your rep when things are wrong. Again, don't be an asshole about it. Don't try to rake them over the coals because somebody made a mistake, but point out every single one. Don't accept things that you shouldn't have. Don't bring in food that is of a low quality or is already starting to turn, right? Like hold your suppliers accountable, check everything in very carefully, and what's not good, reject it. And then talk to your sales guy and tell him why you rejected it. And at least in my experience, if you approach it not as a, oh man, I am so pissed, like screw you guys, what the hell is this shit? If you approach it from a, hey man, just wanted to let you know we had these problems on the order this week. And this one problem that we had, this is the third time this month that we've had this problem. So, 3 out of 8 orders, I've had this problem, and that's really not very cool. They'll take care of you. They'll fix it. They'll report it up the chain. It helps improve their business. But when you're a jackass about it, when you get all in their face and yell at them like a lot of people in this industry do, they're not motivated to help you. So be nice to them, but hold them accountable for their delivery accuracy and their product quality. When something's wrong, call them out on it. Do it in a nice way, but call them out on it. Because fundamentally, you're paying them for a service. And if they're not doing it, you need to hold them accountable and get them to correct their customer service. Couple more ideas for you on how we can optimize menu engineering, right? Menu engineering, menu engineering, menu engineering. I'm not going to say anything more than that because we've had multiple episodes where we've talked in depth about menu engineering, but do menu engineering, period, end of story. And my final way to optimize. Now, this is hard because I know not a lot of restaurants and bars currently are in forecasting. But if you are forecasting your sales, if you are creating budgets, look at what your sales are supposed to be next week. Look what they're supposed to be next month. Order to your forecast, right? If you don't have a formal forecasting system, because I understand most people don't in this industry, but if you don't have formal forecasting, look at last year's sales. Use that as a guide to drive you. Look at last month's sales. Use that as a guide to drive you. But make sure that you're adjusting for seasonality as you go through the year. It is amazing to me how many bars and restaurants I will walk into and they'll be throwing stuff away because no one thought about the fact that it was going to snow this week and we were going to be real slow. So now you're throwing a bunch of food away. Like, look at the weather, look at events going on in your area, look at what your historical sales are, and come up with an idea so that you can actually order based upon things that you expect to happen, not just historical things that have already happened. Try to focus on predicting the future a little bit. Now, that is difficult. Like I said, I'm not aware of any software out there right now that handles that. But if and when some forecasting software becomes available, that's the kind of reason to get it so that you can predict your ordering, manage your inventory in line with future expectations that are statistically reliable. Now, we've talked through a lot. So real quickly, I'm going to give you a bit of an implementation roadmap on all this. If you wanted to really supercharge your inventory system, here's how I would recommend you do it. For the next couple weeks, establish a baseline by doing a very comprehensive inventory count, implement that actual versus theoretical tracking, and build the groundwork of a strong inventory system. Then in the next phase, say for the next week, so 3 to 4 weeks from now, install digital tracking systems if you're going to use one and change staff on the new procedure. So that's bring in Margin Man, bring in Market Man or Margin Edge. I smash those two together. Extra chef, right? You can bring in something like that, train your staff on it, get that implemented. Weeks 5 through 8. So a month from now, that whole month, expand your system to include all inventory categories and implemented automated reorder points. Implement PARs that are solid, that are based on real data. Then in month 3, optimize based on your initial data. Like you've been measuring this stuff really closely now, so optimize your inventory. Refine your loss prevention measurements and what you're doing about them, and establish an ongoing improvement process within your inventory system. Doing all that, what would I call a success? Well, I think you can reduce your total inventory costs by 3 to 5% and have a 50% reduction in stockouts and in loss within about 3 months. I mean, it's difficult. This is a lot of work to put in place a complex inventory system, but it will pay for itself, right? This is time well spent. And I've mentioned multiple times throughout this podcast, it is an annoying thing to do. I love data. I love spreadsheets. Inventory gets a little grindy even for me. So the other option is always to outsource. But if you're going to do it in-house, do it properly. And once you have your inventory feeling all right, implement these more advanced strategies. Pick one and do it, or follow, the 3-month plan that I just laid out, because it will make your bar better. It will make your bottom line better. It will make things easier to manage, and it will make you a happier owner. So today, we've covered a complete framework for advanced inventory management. We've talked true cost analysis to reveal hidden expenses. We've talked sophisticated tracking systems that provide real-time insights. We've talked about comprehensive loss prevention to eliminate shrinkage systematically and data-driven optimization strategies that maximize your efficiency. Professional inventory optimization typically reduces carrying costs by 15 to 25% while improving product availability, reducing waste through systematic analysis and implementation, and again, just makes your life better as an owner. So, advanced inventory management is not about counting bottles. That's basic inventory management. It's about transforming inventory from a cost center into a profit optimization system. And I will tell you right now, all of the most successful bars, they are doing this. So, give some of this stuff a try. If you have any questions, join Bar Business Nation, our Facebook group. You can shoot me a message there. We can chat, just make a post, and I can help you implement this. Or feel free, go down in the show notes, grab a strategy session with me. I'd be more than happy to help you discuss how to optimize your inventory specifically. That about wraps it up for today. If you enjoyed today's insights, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you are ready to take your bar to the next level, schedule a strategy session with me by clicking the link in the show notes below. Until next time, have a great day, and we will talk again later.